Okay, welcome to video 4. This is our last video for the unit. So today we're going to be talking about the economic impacts of the Industrial Revolution. So you already know that during the 1800s we saw the growth of the middle class. And thanks to the Industrial Revolution, this ends up widening the gap between the rich and the poor. You'll see two groups of people: those who think the government should stay out of business affairs, and those who think the government needs to be more involved. Now, guess which side the business owners are on? If you said or thought that the government should stay out, you are absolutely right. Now, you've seen this image before. Think back to Unit 3 when we talked about the age of discovery and exploration. This represents the old economic belief of mercantilism. Remember that mercantilism is the belief that there was a fixed amount of wealth in the world. It was also believed that if a country were going to become wealthy and therefore have more power, they had to stay wealthy. And what's the best way to do that? Take it from other countries, of course. So the raw materials that were found in the colonies would then be sent back to the mother country, where manufactured goods would then be made and exported. More exports equals more money in the mother country's treasury. And here's another representation of what mercantilism is. Okay, so anytime you see this chart in your notes, I need for you to skip it. This is for an activity that we are going to do in class. Don't skip this part of the lecture. You need to watch the rest of the video, but you've got to understand this for the class activity. The rest of the video is going to discuss three very different economic systems: capitalism, socialism, and Marxism. So skip down to the capitalism section. We're going to start there. But first, let me give you a little bit of background info. Somewhere off to the side of your notes, I want you to write this down: laissez-faire. This refers to a policy that many believed in during the Age of Enlightenment. It is a French term, and it means let do, or as folks at the time like to interpret as let people do as they please. Economic philosophers at the time argued that when the government interfered or intervened with business affairs, it hurt business. But if there were free trade, then economies would prosper. This leads us to capitalism. Capitalism is defined as an economic system in which the factors of the production are privately owned and money is invested in business ventures. Now, this concept of capitalism was first published in a book titled Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. He was a professor at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, and he defended the idea of free trade or a free economy. He thought that economic freedom would guarantee economic success. And there are four things you need to know for the what of capitalism. First, wealth can be created with manufacturing and agriculture. In other words, a country can become wealthy off of the products it produces in the farming industry. Second, it should be a free enterprise system. This goes back to the economic philosophy of laissez-faire. Another detail about capitalism is that business owners or entrepreneurs run their business with one goal in mind. They want to make a profit. And finally, capitalism does not support laws, regulations, or any sort of government interventions in economics. So how is all of that achieved? There are three laws. Now, I am so sorry, but for some reason, the third law box got cut off in your notes. Please make space off to the side for the third law. Okay, so the first law of capitalism is the law of self-interest. They are working for their own good. The second law is the law of competition. Manufacturers with the lowest price or the best quality will see the most profit in a capitalist economy. And finally, the third law is the law of supply and demand. Enough goods have to be produced at the lowest possible price to meet demand in the market economy. So basically, prices and profits depend on the availability and demand for the goods. Now, the problem with capitalism is that it led to an uneven distribution of wealth. So only a small percentage of the population was actually getting rich. Okay, on to socialism now. So where capitalism has a laissez-faire philosophy, utopian socialism, excuse me, utopian socialism has a philosophy that either the government or the wealthy folks in society must take care of those less fortunate and make an effort to improve their lives. And we have this gentleman to thank for it, Robert Owens. Whoops, there he is, Robert Owens. He was a British factory owner who improved the working conditions for his workers after seeing the misery and poverty that they endured every day. He wrote The New View of Society, and he suggested a number of things. So he thought that folks should live in settlements. He actually came to the United States in 1824 and began a cooperative community called New Harmony. He wanted it to be a perfect living place. Now, while New Harmony only lasted a few years, there were other cooperative communities that popped up across the nation. He also thought that folks should work for the common good of society and not selfishly for themselves. He also believed that public ownership would help workers, meaning that the workers should have some ownership in the places they worked. And finally, he believed that profits should be shared. This leaves us with Marxism, which is also known as communism. So Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto. Now, what is that? These men believed that society has also been split into two factions, and you already know the names of these groups. It was the bourgeoisie, okay, so think of them as the haves, and the proletariat, think of them as the have-nots. They also believed in that economic policy alone was what ruled society. So according to Marx and Engels, the Industrial Revolution made the rich richer and the poor poorer. They believed that eventually the proletariat, or the workers, the poor, would rise up against the bourgeoisie. This meant that the capitalist society would eventually destroy itself from within. This economic philosophy influenced men that we'll talk about in future units, like Vladimir Lenin from Russia, China's Mao Zedong, and the recently deceased Fidel Castro, who ruled Cuba for decades. Okay, so that wraps up Unit 8. We're all done with the Industrial Revolution. Real quick unit, make sure that you are prepared and ready for your test, which is coming up soon. See you in class.